Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming and giving us 45 minutes. My name is Nick Holliday. I am a field manager for Southeast Toyota. I work for an agency called 22 Squared. And this is Robert Donovan. He's with an ad agency, president, CEO, and founder of Dom360. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how to plan for your marketing budgets and strategies in 2016. If you haven't heard, there's going to be an election this year, and that might impact some of the things that we do or have done in the past. And now there's huge opportunities.
Can you move your microphone maybe? They're not hearing you in the back. Yeah.
Hello? Better?
There you go.
Awesome. So just to kind of go through the agenda real quick, I'm going to start off and talking about the climate, so what's happening right now, Robert will. Then we'll go through some tactics. Think of it more of like an offensive and defensive strategy in that regard. We've got a cool technique called 15 bucks that Robert will talk about. And then we'll finish up with, after it's all over, what's the plans in place you need to think about there.
Great.
And obviously, I haven't seen a lot of presenters mention this, but hey, you can win an iPad if you tweet. I don't know how many people are Twitters in here, but if there's anything interesting, which hopefully, fingers crossed, there's a couple cool things that we'll mention in this presentation. Feel free to tweet it out with a hashtag DD20, and you could win an iPad from one of the many sponsors that are giving.
I think they have some Apple Watches too. So
awesome, cool. Well, let's get going.
Great, guys. So you're here today because the election is upon us. I mean, every day something changes. I think Iowa's happening soon, and we know that the conventions aren't until July, right? So, I mean, there's going to be a lot that happens in between now and then, and there's lots of uncertainty, and people tend to cover up when there is uncertainty, right? We all have a tendency to seek safety, seek shelter. This is just who we are as humans, and it's no different when you have a political year, right? So, car, second biggest purchase in the household, it does weigh into the decision. Whether or not that person is going to wait or not, that's entirely up to them. But just know in the back of their mind that they're thinking, what is the road ahead? Is it this side of the aisle or that side of the aisle or whatever? How do I feel about that? So 25% of Americans expect the economy to get better over the next year, right? So that's not the majority. I mean, that's a small percentage, really. So really, we're looking at a little bit of pessimism there.
Probably worse after the stock market today. Don't check if you haven't checked yet. Ugly. Again, sometimes this doesn't necessarily impact our sales. There's been a couple studies just recently that said, hey, it might not, but from a mindset, which we're going to talk about later, it could. It's how we market to them might need to have to change.
Right. And 40% of consumers say they're worried the general election could impact their financial situation. What does that mean? That's pretty open-ended. I mean, it could mean your stock or your 401k or how much I can put into savings or, what I now need to spend on healthcare because that stuff is ballooning. And so it means a lot of different things to a lot of people, but that's a pretty big number. 40% of people are worried about that. So, like Nick was saying, this is like a filter, right? When you're distilling your marketing message, think about this. And just like you would go on your site and you would do your daily site check. Hopefully everybody does that. They go on their website and they do that. This is another check, right? So, how can I resonate with these people? How can I resonate with the uncertain times? So, again, the conventions fire up in July, and spending is going to be huge for that month, going through the middle of August. And so this is important to note. And then Nick's going to get into some of the reasons why. And then again, after Labor Day.
Yeah, so there's really a few different tactics we're going to take. So I want you to think of this like as a football field, an offensive and a defensive strategy. The first one's kind of a bummer for us, but it's a reality that happens every 4 years. You know, although we think we're great people, the industry thinks we suck. In fact, the only people that are hated more than car dealers are politicians and ad guys. And good news for me is I'm an ad guy that sells cars, so I'm hated twice as much as you guys. But when politicians go around, what do? They're trying to find holes in, around there in the local economies and things like that. And more often than not, they look to a car dealer and say, look what they're doing. You know, they're tricking customers, or they're scamming customers on fees and things like that. It's really important to note that, and hopefully we do this on a day-to-day basis anyways, make sure you're compliant, make sure you're following guidelines, you don't have any rogue salespeople that are out there, because again, a dozen plus opportunities every single year this happens where not necessarily the presidential candidate, but your local candidates will come around and point out a store, and it makes the local news.
Just a case in point on that, back in the day when we did print ads, I had a client that liked to use the image and likeness of Arnold Schwarzenegger in his ads. And it was one of these deals where I just decided I'm not doing his print ads anymore, so we did them with the newspaper. Election year comes around, local politician grabs this thing, he's using this image and likeness, he reports it, big lawsuit, the whole 9 yards. So whatever. I mean, you never know how that's going to play out. Make sure you're up to date with all of your attorney general's guidelines, whatever they have, if they produce some kind of automotive advertising guidelines or just in general. And a lot of the attorney generals, I know George is really good about this, when they'll have a session every year, and we go to that session and they tell us what's new, what they're going to be looking at, what they're concerned about. And so it's good for you to have that good working relationship. It also is good to even have some legal counsel, if you are going to try and get aggressive, to run some of your ads through and make sure that that message is going to be good and no one's going to have a problem with it.
Yeah, just to reiterate though, I mean, again, 4 years ago, just think of the things that we didn't have or we weren't focused in on from a dealer level, like Twitter and Facebook and some of these social channels and YouTube, and so 4 years ago, yeah, or maybe even still today, the state compliance person sees our print ads or sees our billboards, sees our TV scripts, things like that. We need to make sure our employees who are talking on our behalf also understand those rules, because that's where it becomes really, really dangerous when all of a sudden you have 40, 50 different people within your dealership marketing and talking for you. A few other things on the defensive side. This is more traditional. I know we're at Digital Dealer, but it needs to be said. You guys need to make your buys as soon as possible. Of course, there's going to be much more money spent in the markets, and you need to make sure you have placement. One of the best practices to make sure you have maybe an annual buy in place. This doesn't mean you set it and forget it. You still revisit it every single month like you used to with just booking a plan. But instead you can kind of, either trim back or plus up a buy and be more proactive that way. If you don't have a great relationship, your GM, your owner doesn't have a great relationship with your rep, you're in trouble. You need to start and get one as soon as possible. Take them to dinner as soon as possible. And I say that because they're the ones that are going to let you know if your spots get bumped. You need a report from them every single week that says, hey, you lost X amount of dollars in network, and they can help you either replace that or you need to take and be proactive and move it to other mediums. I'm going to show you a breakdown. And most politicians spend most of their money on network TV, obviously, because there's highest reach and reach there. They're not on cable, so we can take some of those dollars and allocate it to cable. This is the breakdown. If you guys are involved with TV at all, and again, I know this is a digital conference, but if you're involved with TV at all, this probably looks a lot like a car dealer buy. A lot of us spend a lot of our money in the local news. Because, again, very few people are TiVoing it. We're spending some of that in sports. We're spending some of that a little bit in daytime, not a lot. Prime access leading into the primetime programming. The only thing we're not really doing is probably the primetime stuff. That's where your national and your regional advertising comes in. But, again, think about it. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars invested, millions of dollars in big market, in these areas where you usually are. What happens? Costs go up. So we got to be proactive there. All right, so from an offensive standpoint, what can we do? First thing is super, super simple. Pick what you want to do and make sure it flows through everything that you do, right? So I'm going to jump ahead. The second bullet is a unique selling proposition. So what do you stand for? You know, salespeople should have their own unique selling proposition. Dealerships should too. You know, what makes you unique from everyone else in town, everyone else in the country? You have to have a story, and that needs to be told. But there's also obviously the ABC sales events, you know, the big national events, and you want to leverage those. But get with your group, your management team, and decide on a monthly basis those one or two things that you want to talk about, and everything needs to be said, you know, the same across the board. We can't have, and this, you know, maybe this happened a year ago with your dealership, the TV station runs one thing, the radio station runs something else, different creative. Pandora runs something else. You know, all these different mediums are talking different things. That's not going to help us, especially as our market or our messaging gets cut by opportunities, you know, from lack of opportunities because of the political spend. Merchandise online, that just kind of goes with, you know, what I just talked about. You know, so now, although it's not a medium that you spend on, your website, you know, is really important too. Your lead response tools, you know, your customer responses. So again, ABC sales event should be in your first response to your customers.
Guys, just to reiterate the why buys, a lot of times you already have this. It's just not packaged up right. So you already have free Wi-Fi. Maybe you're buying bagels every morning. Maybe you're having a manicure Wednesday or whatever. But taking all of these things that you're doing and packaging them up into an advantage or a promise or the family plan or whatever you want to call it is something that resonates with customers. It's very soft sell, but it really, we do this time and time again, and I can't tell you how effective it is. It's very effective just to take what you're doing and package it up and use that as a common thread through everything you're doing.
Yep. And again, that should apply to the offline too. What do I mean by that? When a customer calls your phones, are you answering it ABC Twitter? Are you calling about XYZ, or did you know we have a lifetime warranty, or whatever that story is? You know, so it needs to flow everywhere. Often our dealerships are built with the coldest elements possible known to man, right? Glass and metal and concrete. You know, so how do we brighten that up? Sometimes that's our salespeople and their smiley faces, but sometimes it's balloons and banner stands, and again, getting that unique selling proposition where people are sitting waiting for service to be done. You know, all that's got to be done. And then the last thing is make sure in our messaging we talk about what people care about. And they don't care, I hate to break it to you, about the car. They buy the car because of other things. And I'm going to skate and go back to the political topic because we need to tie that in continuously to make the title make sense. You know, let's think back to when George W. Bush got elected his second time. You know, his big platform was people are going broke because there's too much taxes and you're not going to be able to afford to put your kids through college because you're giving all your money to the government. That resonated with people. You know, it made sense. Like, hey, that's true. You know, and I do have 3 kids at home. You know, 8 short years later when the incumbent president, President Obama, was running, Mitt Romney was up there, and what was his platform? His platform was the global economy and, you know, our national debt. Now, those are big, big topics and really, really important, but that's not internal to the customer. They can't connect to that on a personal level. And so, you know, sometimes this is going to be different by every single person, but in this economy and that type of thing, there's going to be certain focal points that's going to apply everyone on a local level, and you need to think about why are they buying the car, not just what car do they want. And that's what you need to talk on as well. Obviously, we said, hey, that network buy, some of that money is going to have to get pulled because you're just not going to be able to spend it. And you can spend a little bit on cable, but where's another place you can spend it and get video? Online, right? You know, you can buy it through Pandora, and I saw the Pandora rep in the back. You know, you can buy it through YouTube. There's a bunch of different networks you can place video. You know, and I'm not suggesting, and hopefully a lot of other people at this conference are going to say this too, we don't run our TV slot there. You know, we run something similar. but the brand is still going to be the same. You're going to still have the same spokesperson, the same fonts, the same colors, the same messaging. It's just going to appear different. The content's going to be slightly different to get them to go to the website instead of them picking up the phone or whatever. So we got to use that. We got to maybe consider more mass reach. We often at this conference think about hyper-targeting specific groups, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But again, you need part of your budget just to go to the masses. And a lot of the masses are online, watching video. What's great about YouTube, TrueView, is you only pay if they watch that full 15-second, 30-second video. So you can really, really maximize your dollars, which, of course, don't we all wish that was the case on cable or network TV, right? And this is where people are going today. I was just trying to figure out the numbers. I think about 4.5 million hours were watched last year on YouTube on researching cars. Isn't that crazy? 4.5 million hours. We just saw the YouTube rep yesterday. People aren't looking, for crazy produced videos. They're looking for test drives, information. They're looking to learn, right? You've heard many, many, many speakers say, customers don't come to dealerships anymore. 1.2, 1.5, 1.8, doesn't matter the number, it's less than 2, right? What does that mean to you? They're physically visiting you online now instead. Instead of taking 5 test drives like they used to in 2005, they're taking 1 physical test drive and 4 virtual test drives. So you got to have that video there. You want to be the leader. You don't want, close your ears, Cox people in the room. You don't want AutoTraderCars.com, KBB, Edmunds, TrueCar educating your customer. You need to do that.
And just to add to this, when you do an annual buy, right, you're thinking through what the thrust months are. When am I going to do a used car sale? Am I doing the 4th of July thing? So you're thinking not only what dollars you're going to spend, but what you have a rough idea of what you're going to do. There is a difference between how things work now and the way they used to work. When it was not so digital and the factory was running spots, we would piggyback off their spots, right? And we're going to roadblock and we're going to put ours right after the factory runs. I know the rep, all this stuff, right? So that's top of the funnel stuff, okay? And what we've found is that when the factory is actually on, okay, so there's some kind of event going on or what have you, we can actually pull back and not do that broadcast buy or that radio buy or whatever the case may be. So we can dedicate those dollars down the funnel, okay? Because that's where we're going to have an opportunity to pick them up. They're going to get that top of mind awareness through the manufacturer event, but then they're going to find us online. So it's a mid to low funnel event for us, and that's why when we take things like TrueView and just online video, you can go a long way with a little bit of money with that stuff. So you can literally be everywhere, and then we throw all the retargeting in there, and you can look ginormous. I mean, I'm sure everybody's had these conversations with a customer or a friend, or they're like, oh my gosh, I went on your website, and then everywhere I went on the internet, I saw you, right? I mean, it's very powerful for us to take advantage of this, and even more so in this election year where inventory is tight. It's a great time for you to really try to experiment with this, and I think you'll find that it may be a strategy moving forward. So,
yeah. So again, there's other ways to do mass reach too, but you've got to have that as part of your plan, like he's talking about. And then you want to add in all this hyper targeting that we continue to hear from all these speakers the last couple days. Because there's great return on investment when you again appear everywhere to the people that you care about the most. And who do you care about the most to? Maybe that's a conversation when you go back and you think about it and talk to all your managers. Who do you wish you could get more of in the dealership? Is it more sales customers for specific products? Is it more retention on the service side? First service, third service, maybe it's a tire promotion. How do we pull all those lists? We've got all these lists, right? We've had garage predictor lists for forever. I mean, anyone that's done direct mail in the last 50 years probably has used a garage predictor list. No different on the digital side, right? Your customer base, right? We've got that to use. We've got leads. I don't know any dealer that sells 100% of the leads that they get coming in, right? So how can we take that 120 days of unsold leads and talk to those customers with different messages? Maybe it's a trade or a test drive offer, a $25 gift card for a test drive, or a try before you buy, free oil change, just to come in and experience the dealership. That's the messaging I don't necessarily want to give to the masses, but the guys that have already said, hey, I'm maybe interested in buying a car from you, the 800 I have in my CRM, absolutely.
So what is all this right here? There's a common thread through it all, right? It's called cost per piece, right? And so we're saying get very specific. When you have to buy something by a cost per piece, then let's get very specific on how and hyper targeted on what we're going to do, right? Notice saturation mail isn't up here, right? That's not up there. I mean, we don't want to be sending a mailer to everybody in a zip code. We know that that's not the right strategy. But what did we say on the previous slide? We said unfocus, get broader with your internet stuff, which is kind of like the exact opposite, right? Somebody walks into the dealership and they have a nice flashy mailer and you're like, oh, okay, we'll do 10,000 or whatever, right? It's let's get super targeted with the stuff that's going to cost us by the piece, and then let's broaden everything on the digital side. So,
and when you get super targeted, obviously, the ROI is going to be phenomenal because you got a really small list, and there's only so much inventory you want to, you can appear in. So, definitely something to do. Here's the reality. A great stat: 70% of customers, once they get to you, they're out of your reach. So you only get a small percentage once they come to your website, submit a lead. So there's huge, huge opportunities to be higher in the funnel. And that's a lot of times when we talk about digital, it's I only want to take care of these leads, or I only want the guy that's searching for me in my backyard. We need to think more global than that. Let's not wait for the lead provider to sell us the lead. Let's get that lead before they, when they're considering how to submit that information. Be more proactive there. Last couple things, equity mining tools. Hopefully everyone in this room is working the service lane and using that tool, right? Again, this is another place where we can take those lists, which hopefully our guys are calling on, and we're sending direct mail pieces to, and we're talking to people again in the service drive. We take those lists and upload to Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and Pandora and all these different places, Google, Gmail, display advertising. There's hundreds of places now, just one short year later, where we can do specific intentional marketing to. So I can just talk to the people that are turning in leases in the next 30 to 60 days with a specific message. And that is going to resonate so much more than ABC sales event, come on down, okay? So we got to be more realistic and be more intentional with that. Direct mail, we've already kind of talked about that, but sadly, there's still no better marketing tool to touch more people than direct mail. You're physically in their mailbox. I mean, yeah, maybe a lot of them are just junking it right away, but you're touching them. No other medium has that. Email. Open rates are going down. That's the facts, but it's free. We just, again, need to be more intentional. There's tons of tools out there that allow that. Outsell is one of them, if you haven't checked that out. It allows you to automate some of that with some marketing automation. Social media. We've kind of already mentioned this a little bit, but this is a huge opportunity. I just listened to a salesperson, Laura Madison, former salesperson, if you didn't hear her. There's opportunities for a salesperson to sell somewhere between 200 to 300 cars on their own without taking it up, just from social. We need to use that, not just from an advertising standpoint, but from a sales standpoint, to reach out to our customers, our friends, our family. Social media is word-of-mouth marketing. That's all it is. It's just 2016 word-of-mouth marketing. And I'm so proud I just remembered the year because I know I was going to screw it up. And then the last thing is, again, just more hyper-targeting, IP address targeting, figuring out who's been to our website and going after that. So,
all right. So One of my first agencies was Ronald Reagan's old agency. So I built political candidates and 501c3s and saw the other side of politics and ran in the other direction. But there's a lot that you can learn from these candidates. They have the best and the brightest working on these campaigns. It's literally one shot, right? I mean, they're putting everything that they have behind this. And so they pay for the best talent in the country. So what we like to say is, why wouldn't you benefit from that? You have an amazing opportunity right now, okay? From now until July, you can literally pick 3 candidates on each side of the aisle, right? Give them $15 each. Donate $15 to them, okay? The reason why you want to do this, okay, and I can tell you from experience, once you're on the donor list, okay, it's different from just going and signing up and being on the email list, right? You're gonna get all of their marketing. You're gonna get all of their social media. You're gonna get everything, okay? And it's a wonderful experience for you to go through as a marketer or a dealer principal or an internet manager, whatever your role is in the organization. You're here because you have some say in the advertising, right? So why wouldn't you do this, right? I mean, everybody in this room should already be signed up for the big companies like Amex or Chase or whatever, right? And pay attention to that, because you get something in your inbox. You should look at it because it's a marketing piece, right? And how can I use that for me? So it's really important for you to monitor all of these candidates and really try to learn what kind of tactics, and see if you can convert that over. It's just it's amazing what you'll see and what you'll find. I would love to say that I knew everything, but I don't, and I just. Every election is a wonderful time to do this. So,
I think there's an old train of thought, and I don't know if it's prevalent anymore, but we used to think that car buyers were different. They shopped differently. Like, they expected, this specific road to the sale, and that's how they bought a car, right? And I think we're coming to learn that the way that I buy a washing machine tomorrow is the way I'm going to want to buy a car the next day. So. It's the same thing here. The way I buy a president is the way I'm going to want to experience, my car experience too. And so, in order to grow and learn, and I'll give you a really profane quote in a second, is to look at outside this industry. We can't be narrowly focused on in these walls and these companies that are pitching us, because there's bigger and better things outside of automotive that'll teach us stuff. My favorite quote is, information is bullshit. Execution is everything. So, look at what this information they give, and then go take these best practices and execute on them. You guys are going to have a crap load of notes, hopefully, by the time you guys leave this after 3 days. That's great. I've been to probably 40 of these things, it seems like. It's what you do with those notes when you leave.
Absolutely. So, when you look at the use of social media for online adults, and we're 18 to 54 here, is usually the demo. 71% of us are on Facebook, 26 on Instagram, 23 on Twitter. I mean, these percentages are pretty significant. So it's just speaks to the fact that we need to be there. And here we are. This is kind of what it looks like currently in the run from a social media lens. And I guess Donald and Hillary are up there.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I mean, again, I've just started to follow these guys and take Robert's advice, and it's amazing. Whoever you like, it doesn't matter. But look at a Donald Trump or a Hillary in just the last 30 days. They're using their social influence to get attention. It's not necessarily ad dollars that are winning the eyeballs. It's a social influence. I was on Facebook and I saw one of the two up at the top. They had a testimonial from another famous person saying how great they were. Right? Isn't that the same thing we do? customer referrals and stuff like that. That's all they're using.
Maybe to do or not to do, right? Yeah. There's good things to take away from these candidates and some bad things as well, right? To not utilize, right? I mean, people can really, shoot themselves in the foot pretty quickly, and you don't want to do the same with your dealership. So this leads into, who do I trust, right? Who are the trusted people? Because, it's not just the dealership's Facebook account, right? We can do a lot through our individual Facebook accounts. And I think that there's a way to, create that synergy between the individual account and the dealership account. So there's the post on the dealership account, and then it's shared on the individual. And so you need to see who your confidants are. This is typically your management team, okay? You should be able to trust them. You should put a social media policy in place, and it's just part of marketing, right? Just like somebody would be talking about them and what they do at a soccer game, it's the same thing. Let's do it online. And now, where we've kind of seen this not be good is, typically on the salesperson level. I don't know if we want to have every salesperson on there doing this, and that's an individual basis for you. I mean, that's kind of where it starts to get a little gray, but it's definitely something that you have to deploy. So,
all right, so probably in a week you'll be ready for political season to be over. But what do you do when it's over? First off, again, from an awareness standpoint, if you're not on TV and nobody else is, all of a sudden you're not necessarily top of mind, but that means nobody else is top of mind. So if you're early out, in January and February are always kind of slow months for our industry. We get it, so your budgets might not be as big, but it's also, budget's not going to be as big for your competitors. So if you have an extra $10,000, $20,000 to spend on brand awareness, guess where it helps? In March, all of a sudden you're top of mind when people really want to buy, so being a little bit early out on there can really, really help.
And when's the election? November 6th, right? Why wouldn't you go full gas from November 6th through the end of the year? Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, it would be a good strategy. There's not going to be a lot of people taking advantage of that. So your share of voice is probably going to be huge, right? You're going to get a lot for probably not a lot of money. The stations will be more than agreeable with you to take you up on those kinds of buys, because there's really, there's going to be no more. It's a dead stop right at the election, pretty much, for all these candidates. So.
Yeah, and let me again. I don't sell anything. I don't work for any companies here. I work with almost all of the companies here. Let me tell you this one thing real quick. The reality is, if you're going to be successful in this business, you can't always look at ROI. If we were only looking at ROI, we would spend all of our money with all these vendors here, because digital is the best investment you can make. We've kind of talked a little bit about TV and traditional and stuff like that. You know why that's important? Because you need to still be top of mind, and they need to buy from you and not just from the brand. If they buy from the brand, all of a sudden you just become an order taker, and that's not what the dealership envisioned 100 years ago when it opened the doors, right? You're unique, and hopefully the dealers in the head are shaking their heads, right? So the brand message is important. Slowly that budget's getting slipped away, but it can't slip away completely. And some of that messaging can happen on the digital level, but you got to make sure you're intentional with it. Your budget should include retention strategies, brand awareness strategies, and in-market opportunity strategies. And you need to plan for all three of those. Off the soapbox. All right, so here's the pledge we kind of asked you guys to take. First off, again, be really proactive and place your buys early. Make sure you have that great relationship with your rep. Secondly, learn from the candidates like he talked about. What are we talking about? $100 or so to kind of get all their messaging and learn. And even after political's over, learn from other people. There's so many awesome podcasts and stuff like that out there from outside that industry. If you're like many car folks, you've got 10, 20, an hour and 10-minute commutes on a daily basis. Stop listening to AC/DC and start listening to a podcast occasionally. Tell your story, throughout, the different mediums that we had, like we talked about, direct mail and TV and radio and billboards, as well as paid search copy and retargeting messages in our website, in our dealership experience, our person that answers our phone, and the banner stands and things like that in our dealership. And then again, what's the message? What are those 1, 2, 3 things that we want to focus on? Your unique selling proposition, what people care about, and maybe the sales event. Make sure that everybody agrees on it and it's implemented across the board. That your salespeople know what the service incentives are, and your service guys know what the sales incentives are. And they all can talk to your customers with a consistent voice.
I'd just like to add to that. I mean, the manufacturers have already planned for this, right? Production is essentially flat. I mean, if everybody's thinking we'll do 17 million again this year, but that may not happen. And then there's always a contraction the year after an election, right? So that doesn't sound like 2017. Could be even as good as 2016. So you got to do the best that you can with what you got, right? And so it's very important to really be hyper-focused on this piece of your business because it's really going to help you make or break your year. It's probably one of the single most important things that you could focus on. Obviously, there's everything else going on, but you really need to kind of step up and really apply yourself to this piece of your business.
Time is money, and we appreciate your time. And thankfully, if you want to, you can give me money afterwards. With that, questions? Anybody else?
Yeah, does anybody have any questions? We'll stay up here, and if anybody wants to come up and ask individual questions or get a business card or whatever, we can do that. But does anybody have any questions that maybe other people would benefit from? Something that, yeah.
Do you have any visibility into how the manufacturers plan on changing their spending as a result of the political year?
Mr. Toyota?
No, I think we follow the same plan, right? We have to have the same relationships with our reps. There's a few tricks to the trades you can do when you're on the regional or national level because we have a little bit more buying power in terms of millions of dollars compared to most stores. But no, it takes work and it takes effort and it takes being on the same page to really accomplish that. There's thousands of ways we can spend our money, as you've probably seen by walking the floors, so we've got to make sure that we're spending the best ways possible for our dealerships to accomplish the goals that we have.
There are several manufacturers that have just continued to skew in the digital direction, right? There was a seminar in New York City. Almost all the manufacturers, CMOs were there, and it was pretty eye-opening to see how they were finally confident in all of their digital spend and just continue to up it. So the traditional message is always going to be there, but it's definitely skewing digital now. So, anybody else? Yeah.
What's your opinion on pay-per-click and kind of just moving away from that altogether?
I want to answer it.
Okay.
He's biased if he does it. No, the reality is, you got to think about it as like the hand raisers in the crowd. I don't understand how anyone could say that you shouldn't do pay-per-click because if I said, all right, so there's this technology and someone tells me they want to buy or service with us and all we have to do is pay $3 to $5 to get that customer, would you be like, yeah, absolutely. You know what that's called? A lead, right? And we paid for them for the last 15, 20 years through all these providers. It's just the next, it's another step because they have to click, then they have to go to their website. And fingers crossed, hopefully you guys have done a good enough job to capture those leads still. Guess what? In my area, leads aren't going down. They're going up. So when I hear industry, nobody's filling out leads, probably because we do a crappy job merchandising those leads. But no, absolutely. Should we be smarter on how we spend because, everybody does it now? It's like TV. Yeah. We need to make sure that again, if you need to sell Ford F-150s because you got a crap load of them, then you capture every single Ford F-150 buyer. But if you only have, and I'm making this up, 2 Ford Edges, let's not spend dollars there. So be more intentional. No questions from this guy. Be more intentional with your spend.
And this was my session in Vegas. If you were there, I could send it to you if you want. But basically the marriage between SEO and SEM, right? If you're number one for a keyword organically, do you need to buy that keyword and be in that number one position, right? So I think everybody in this room, probably isn't your first rodeo. Maybe it is, but everybody has powered up over the last 5 years when it comes to digital. And I think that pay-per-click was almost a crutch, right, for bad SEO, right? So I think that you can reduce your spend on certain keywords that you're already number one for.
When someone says that paid search isn't where you need to be spending your money, they're thinking cars is different than appliances. But I guarantee you, when you search for a washer and dryer on Google, Best Buy shows up 100% of the time. And that's why when you search for a Ford or a Toyota, nationally, those ads show up 100% of the time because they know it's a good buy. We're not different.
Whether or not they show up is irrelevant when people are actually following. They can show up 100% of the time, but I've been watching it for a while now and not actually seeing
Clicking? They're not clicking on the ads?
just so Dealer Inspire has their end of an ROI on their website to match our sales with website traffic and where they're.
Well, that's adjusting like how you're spending your dollars, right? You need to be more intentional. So what I talk to my stores about is, again, if I know I have 4 core products that I need to go after in a given year, right? Let's make sure I get as many of those buyers as possible, just like I would buy as many leads as possible per Camry. You know, let's get as many buyers from my website. Then let's look at the analytics and make sure those people are actually going to the VDP pages, right? And then once they get to the VDP pages, make sure my conversions stay high. And then the next step is making sure my closing rates stay the same or continue. So you got to watch it more on a micro level. But yeah, no, it's still just a hand raiser. Do we want all of them? Absolutely not. You know, when you buy your name, which I think most people should because it's just buying the billboard in your backyard, you know, most people when they click on your name, they're coming for service or parts. That's the facts. But if you don't buy it, someone else in town does that hurt your business? Absolutely.
I mean, if you look outside of our industry, if you just went to a Nike or whatever and looked at, you know, their e-commerce platform and what have you, you know, every product, I don't care if it's a $20 basketball, you know, there's pay-per-click behind that. And so, you know, if you go outside, sometimes you can get the answer for our industry outside of our industry. So you can look at other pieces, washing machines, whatever, and, you know, kind of get a good judge of you know, where the right call is. But, you know, there is some validity to just doing really good SEO and owning that. That takes a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of work, and, you know, you really got to be focused and you got to have correct reporting so you know what you're doing. And
I'm agnostic, so you know, again, it drives me nuts when somebody gets up and says, oh, you should totally do this. And once you read their bio, you realize that's what they sell, right? The reality is you should totally do that, but you should also do this, 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 and this too. So it's all part of this whole global strategy, this 360 strategy you have to have to be successful.
I don't know if you can do this in the larger market, but if you haven't, I was wondering, just curious, if you look into a smaller market, you could actually utilize pre-roll for the amount of impressions to replace network TV.
I mean, YouTube.
During those giving time periods. So you don't have to play games with the TV stations that might be charging them too much money for their impressions or not running the.
So he's asking, for those in the back that can't hear, can you take pre-roll and kind of substitute that and make up maybe some of the reach and frequency that you wouldn't get from network TV?
Replacing certain markets.
I mean, it's the second largest site in the world, YouTube, right? On a local level. Yeah, maybe you're in a funky market. You're not actually in a media market, and it's hard for you to buy, and you're a small dealer. So, I mean, I would absolutely be doing that and taking advantage of TrueView and taking advantage of, even maybe looking at some Hulu and things like this. I mean, there's so much now that it's, all of the major broadcasters, NBC, ABC, all these ones, the CBS, they're all, they're all repositioning themselves. They have apps now, and you can watch the live programming there. I mean, you can do ads on that. I mean, just on that platform and within that app and what have you. So, yeah, there's definitely more than one way to skin the cat in that
Adults
one.
25 to 54 are the people that we care about, right? The number one station in your market, everybody's market is YouTube. The number radio station in everyone's market is Pandora. Okay? So we don't need to, I mean, it's great because we get the click-throughs and stuff like that. We also need to think about it as that. It's just another station we add to the buy.
Was there another question back there? I didn't know. No? Oh, here we go.
Yeah, is there any truth to finding the bottom line of, let's just say, radio, where radio stations and other advertisers are regulated to what they can charge politicians so they can't raise their rates during election time, so we can find out what their bottom is?
Come here, Marnie. Marnie's our marketing director. She was a radio personality for years, and she can answer this better than anybody in the room.
And awkwardly, too. Actually, in most states, I don't know the National Advertising Association, but most states, there is a bottom that politicians have to be charged. They can't be charged more than the best client that they have all year long. That's what a politician has to be charged, and once one of them gets that rate, they all have to get that rate if they want it.
Is that public knowledge so we can know their bottom?
It's public knowledge that they have to, if you ask, they have to tell. They don't have to publish it or anything. I'm sorry?
The radio, let's say the rep for a radio station or TV.
Yes. Yes. So if you went to your local rep and said, I need to know what they're spending, if it's $35 for a spot or $200, they have to tell you that.
Okay, good. That'd be a good way to find the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I would make sure you ask them in writing.
You're welcome.
Good. Great. Was there another one?
Anybody
over
else
here?
want to answer some questions for us?
Great.
Awesome. Well, we're over time. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
We'll be up here if anybody wants to come up.